Hello and welcome to today's video, and today I'm going to be talking through actually sorting out the brake discs on this bike. So actually the brake discs and the calipers themselves. Now, as I described in the last video, I actually purchased a set of new hydraulic brakes and discs. They actually came as a complete pack along with the pads and everything else that was needed. They're also pre-bled, so I haven't had to use the bleed kit and mineral oil that I'd actually obtained. Now, what I actually started doing was I removed both of the wheels from the bike, because I'll need to have those off in order to replace the discs. The next thing I did was to unravel the old existing brake handle and caliper setup, which you can see I'm doing here. Now, to do that, there was a couple, I think it was 4mm Allen key bolts which I had to take off, and I then just had to cut some cable ties in order to get it off. It's held in by cable ties, but I think you can get proper bike cable retaining ties, which are like cable ties, but they've got sort of like clip for the cable to go into. So I need to sort of find out what they're called and actually get a set of those so I can just tidy it up a bit better than it is at the moment. The other thing I took the opportunity to do is to give the bike frame a good clean, get rid of any extra sort of grease and grime that I wasn't able to the last time. Now, having one of these bike stand things like I've got here is not essential, but it really does make life a lot easier, and they're also not that expensive either. So here is the rear wheel, and I'm just taking that and the front wheel to the workbench. So you can see here there's actually a few Torx bolts on there. I think they were T25 if I remember rightly. And what I actually did was I kept the current discs and all of the bolts, because there may come a point where if I rebuild the existing calipers, which are very good quality calipers, there may come a point where I will actually put the old setup back on again. Now, underneath each of the bolts rather, there was a shim which basically sat between two of the bolts. Now, I refitted those shims, and if you actually have these on yours, you will actually notice that they have a top marking and also, well, yeah, a top marking, so they are actually orientated to the way that they should be fitted. It's a good idea to, if you don't have them, to actually get a set, because they do just provide a bit of extra security for the bolts, so they sort of stop them slipping and undoing to a certain extent. Now, the Clark's kit that I actually got did come with everything that you needed. However, the one thing that I did notice was you will need some extra washers and some extra bolts for when you come to fit the calipers. Now, the disc itself is marked up with the direction of rotation and also marked up with the size of the disc. This particular kit has got two different sizes of disc. The smaller one goes at the back and the larger one goes at the front. Now, the way that I tightened this disc was in sort of like a triangular form that you can see there, and I didn't go above really hand tight. I think to tighten the disc, if you're going to measure it with a torque wrench, the disc itself actually gives you a figure of, if I remember rightly, 6 Newton meters of torque. So I'm not sure what that is in pound foot, but that is just over hand tight, if I recall correctly. Now, you will need to apply thread lock to the threads if they don't already come pre-coated with thread lock. The new bolts that I did use actually came pre-coated with thread lock. Now, you'll notice here I'm having a bit of trouble actually getting this off. So what I did was I removed the spindle, so removed the quick release skewer / spindle, and just used a suitable power tool with the Torx bit installed in order to get those undone, and that actually speeds up the process as well. Wherever possible with a bike, use hand tools, because everything isn't really sort of done up that tight. You don't need the extra torque that is afforded by a sort of power tool or a ratchet gun or anything like that. The torque ratings are just not high enough to sort of warrant using power tools. So I only use that one there because those screws were not shifting and they were beginning to strip the threads on the top of the bolts, which really is the last thing that I wanted at that particular point. Now you can see here I'm just tightening it up with the tool, but I stopped as soon as I hit the base and then just fully tightened it using the screwdriver itself. So that, if I measured it, might be over the 6 Newton meters, but they're not wrenched up really super tight. They're just tight enough. The other thing that I did with both discs was to cover them with a bit of degreaser and actually sort of remove any potential grease that may have been on the discs during shipping. Certainly car brake discs come covered with grease, and I'm assuming the same thing for the bike brake discs. Now, you can see here, this is slightly later in the process, but what I did initially was I fitted the wheels before fitting the brake calipers. So you can see I've got the rear one there actually installed, or rather not installed. It's just in a position where it's going to be linked up to the frame. And on this particular bike I had to use a couple of washers on the other side to position the brake disc further away, the brake caliper further away from the frame. Now the brake calipers themselves can be adjusted for position, so the actual fitting that goes onto the frame is one position and one position only. You can get adapters which allow you to move the caliper itself either further away from the frame or closer to the frame, depending on the type of caliper position brackets that you actually use. I had to reuse one of my old ones off of the previous set of discs because these ones didn't come with a suitable bracket, so it is probably worth also investing in a selection of suitable brackets. Now they're one position only. The caliper as it fits to the bracket can be positioned in multiple ways, so it's a case of first off making sure that you get the wheels mounted correctly, so just do that eyeballing between the drop bar to the rear frame point where the wheel mounts onto, and also just on the front between the two forks, so you can actually sort of see that the wheel is centralised before tightening up. The other thing that I did as well was, after all of this was sorted out, I took the bike for a quick test ride. You can see there I'm just actually testing the brakes on the front wheel, and they work absolutely fine. So what remained for me to do at that point was just to basically sort of tighten everything up, make sure everything was tightened, refit the handlebar grips. That was something else that I needed to replace, and then just basically cable tie everything up and together. So you can see here I'm actually feeding that rear cable through. The cables themselves are actually filled with fluid, because it is a fluid cable, so to speak. It's basically like a car brake line. It's the fluid that's acting upon the pistons and the brake pads. So it does actually give you a very sort of progressive, smooth, efficient braking mechanism. And I actually prefer it to more traditional V brakes, if I'm going to be perfectly honest. I would also think that they won't be as badly affected by wet weather, so they will probably actually dry out a bit quicker than V brakes, which can become quite inefficient once they start to get wet. Final thing I wanted to do was just give the bike another quick clean, the frame quick clean. There's a bit of paint that's come off on the rear, which I'll probably touch up at some point. And after that, here we go, the completed bike itself. So there are the rear calipers, and you can see there where I had to put in the extra spacers between the mounting bracket and the disc itself and the caliper. And there is the front caliper, and yep, that's all cable tied to the fork. That rear one is a bit comical, but I'm sure it'll be fine. And that's that. Anyway, that's it for this particular video. If you have found this interesting, don't forget to hit the like button, don't forget to subscribe, and I'll see you next time. Take care, thanks for watching.